All right, it's time to get started. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are very excited to have you with us today as we provide an outlook into the federal contracting and grant landscape for 2025. I am Andrea Vendano, and I am the co-founder and CEO of Arlington Consulting Group, a government technology and federal market intelligence company helping small and mid-sized firms navigate the new administration and identify and capture top opportunities. Today's program is brought to you in partnership with GrantExec, a Reston-based technology company tracking and matching grant funding from federal, state, and private sources to nonprofits, researchers, startups, and local agencies. For today's program, we have a great panel of experts. As I said, my name is Andrea, and I have over 15 years of experience in the creative space, developing communication and marketing strategies in private, nonprofit, and government environments. And I also lead the development of Samwise AI, a platform that revolutionizes federal market intelligence by transforming the complexities of government contracting into strategic opportunities. We also have Jared Cox, who currently leads McKinsey's Federal Market and Competitive Intelligence practice, serving as the firm's federal market subject matter expert. Jared has over 10 years of experience delivering strategic data-driven solutions, including market intelligence, corporate development, strategy consulting, white space market analysis, go-to-market strategies, legislative opportunity analysis, and ESG organic strategy for top industry leading firms, including Booz Allen Hamilton and Wolf Den Associates. Ryan Alcorn is the co-founder and CEO of GrantExec, a platform transforming the grant funding landscape with AI-powered discovery and expert human support. Originally born from a web scraping college project, GrantExec now connects organizations to over $80 billion in active funding opportunities through tools like GrantGPT and a nationwide network of grant writers. Ryan is passionate about removing barriers to funding and empowering innovators to do more good faster. And finally, we have Dr. Lisa Steinberg. Lisa is a research scientist and grant consultant with over 25 years of experience in federal research and development funding. She has secured more than $10 million in grants across agencies, including NIH, NSF, DOE, DOD, EPA, NASA, and USDA. Her work spans academia, startups, and early-stage tech companies in fields ranging from bioinformatics to environmental remediation. In today's session, we are going to discuss the latest analysis in the federal contracting and grant market. We're going to review the 2026 fiscal budget. We will review and provide a roadmap to navigate current challenges, and we will review emerging opportunities and strategic actions. Please send us your questions in the chat or using the Q&A function, and we will answer them at the end of the session. If we cannot answer your question during this session, please email us and we will try to get back to you as soon as possible. You will see our email addresses in the chat and also at the end of this presentation. And we will also send you this document at the end of the session. So please don't worry, you don't need to take screenshots and notes of everything. This is going to be a little bit content heavy, but as I said, you will have access to all this information at the end. Now I want to invite Ryan to take it from here.
All right, let's jump right in. So how did we get here? The last few months may have felt like several years, depending on where you stand in the marketplace. But we wanted to do a little bit of a deep dive into the last few months, how we got to this moment, and how things are changing rapidly. So on January 20th, Donald Trump was inaugurated for a second term, and on that same day, DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, was formally established. That also led to executive orders calling for regulatory freezes as well as a larger intent to pause all federal aid. Just a week later, on the 27th, the Office of Management and Budget paused all federal funding. Now, this was incredibly surprising for a number of folks in the space. We recognized that there were major changes coming, but this was unprecedented in its form and was destabilizing to say the least. That said, immediately organizations sued, and within about 48 hours, there was an unpause. The pause was paused. So lots of back and forth just over that couple of days period. So since that day, since the end of January, there's been significant back and forth between executive agencies and the courts, as well as grant seekers, seeking a little bit more clarity into what exactly is happening. Are awards still available? Are existing obligations going to be met? Lots of questions. We'll dive into each of those in just a bit. Just a couple of days later, the NIH capped indirect costs for research grants at 15%, which significantly lowers the overhead allowed by universities to spend on administrative and related tasks outside of the direct research. This funding is critical for universities, and so they argue. Now, if implemented, that will lead to significant changes in how universities pursue research funding. That was blocked shortly thereafter by an injunction from a judge, but that is still pending. So there will be more information to be shared shortly there. On the 21st, the court blocked anti-DEI executive orders, and so there is still quite a bit of fallout. It's yet to be seen to what extent the executive offices will follow these injunctions, but lots of different opinions coming out of the White House, even within the White House, and so navigating those mixed messages is quite interesting. Then more on the contract side, and ACG will be able to speak to this with more clarity, but the DoD increased its compliance levels, and so shortly thereafter, by the 15th, the full year continuing resolution was passed to the end of the fiscal year, avoiding a shutdown. And much of that funding remained the same, although it gave the executive branch quite a bit of latitude to determine how existing obligations would be spent, existing funding opportunities as well. Then moving into the following month, there was an executive order to strip excess procurement rules to streamline the process of bringing in new contracts. Lots of interesting developments on that front. Excited to hear from Jared over there as well. Then at the end of the month, just about a week ago, we learned through an NSF memo that all awards have been paused, and we are awaiting more action, more clarity about what's going to happen next on that front. We anticipate that this is a temporary pause, similar to the one that we saw in late January, but we are awaiting more information. And then also significant news came out just a few days ago about the president's budget proposal for FY26. We'll dive into those details, but there are significant cuts across the board except in defense proposed. And so we'll dive in, show you exactly where those opportunities are. Quite a bit has happened. If your head's spinning, it's all right. All of ours are, but we are in a place where we're getting a little bit more clarity. And so this is the first in a series of conversations about where the market is moving and how organizations looking to secure funding and work with the federal government can stay nimble, can stay effective, and continue their good work. All right, let's continue on. Jared, over to you.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, happy to kind of take the next few slides here. I really want to start off with the FY25 CR and kind of what it did and didn't do. I think at a very high level, kind of 1.66 trillion in funding, very modest adjustments over FY24. So the funding at a high level is there. Defense got a minor uptick of about 6 billion over last year. Non-defense, about a $13 billion cut, a little under 2%. But I will say that cut is mostly from the elimination of all earmarks. So funding levels for each agency are quite healthy. As Ryan noted, it did give, though, the executive branch really expanded executive authority over spending. So the admin can really direct funding to kind of key priorities and is trying to impound and block funding going from areas that don't align with this administration. It also, for the DoD, enabled a $8 billion defense transfer. So there's more, they can kind of redirect based on where kind of new priorities are emerging. And it also increased from 20% to 40% the amount the DoD can spend in the last 2 months of the fiscal year. So we are tracking the last quarter typically already receives significantly more spend than the others with kind of use it or lose it funding. But we expect a very busy last quarter this year with a lot of procurements being frozen and being shifted and new money. So very excited to kind of help firms start to position there. In terms of the civilian spending impacts, there actually were a few kind of key winners this year. FAA got a $750 million increase. IRS got a major kind of $20 billion cut, mostly from the Inflation Reduction Act funding, and kind of various kind of smaller cuts throughout the federal agencies. Moving to the key market takeaways, I think really kind of we're trying to determine what is that post-DOGE landscape? What does it look like? Right now, more than 8,000 contracts have been canceled, about 9,000 grants. So we're looking at that and massive kind of a reduction in force initiatives, massive workforce cuts. But you pair that with a very large reconciliation bill that is coming, where kind of movement between kind of when it may actually come through, but Johnson is kind of hoping by Memorial Day, we'll probably see it sometime this summer, but that's got $163 billion in new funding. And most of that will be front loaded in the next 2 years, aligning with kind of the administration's priorities. But that $163 billion is being financed by a more than 20% cut to essentially every other non-defense agency outside of DHS. So definitely tracking there. We'll have more to come on the next few slides about that. Go back for a moment, just want to touch on this upheaval, and there's been kind of detailed agency expenditure plans due to OMB and Congress. That has halted, as kind of you've seen and many of our clients have seen, a really freeze in all new procurements. And I think there's going to be 2 major waves for new procurement solicitations coming. You're going to see with this pause, a lot of spending has been frozen. As we talked about, the spending levels are very healthy, just not a lot has gotten out the door. I do think now we're going to start to see a bit of a release over the next month or 2 from that pent-up demand. And then as soon as we have the reconciliation passed, that'll be the second. So it's going to be a very busy summer, and especially last few months of the fiscal year. Really kind of high level, those major winners are going to be defense, DHS, cyber, technology. Those are the real, anything automation, AI, that's where we're seeing a ton of still healthy amounts of solicitations being released, and we don't expect that to stop. In terms of the political situation, you look at the FY26 skinny budget, very scary numbers, very scary cuts. We think that quite a bit of that is dead on arrival in Congress. I think more importantly is to track where the new spending is going, where are they prioritizing, because that is what you'll see FY25 dollars pushing towards with this expanded authority. The implication really is to capture this kind of May, June, summer, and kind of last quarter of the fiscal year solicitation wave. You have to really refresh your pipeline, update your capture plans, really identify what the strategic top opportunities are. Go to the next slide. Just want to kind of take kind of a step back, looking at the current kind of DOGE mandate and what comes next, with Elon Musk likely taking a step back in the next few weeks. So we've talked about the freezing and halting expenditures, terminating thousands of grants and contracts, really going after contractors. There's 5.5 million contractor jobs tied to the federal market, and we are seeing some significant pressure and layoffs, particularly in USAID, foreign assistance, I think was the first, but there's more coming. And really going after the consulting market. Massive cancellations. We're starting to see some of those come back. So the key for this is tying it to ROI, showing kind of cost savings, really showing the impact, and that you're not just a traditional kind of cost plus T&M staff aug firm, but you're more of like an outcome-based, solutions-oriented, tech-enabled provider. Let's go to the next slide where we can really now dive into the skinny budget. So we talked about that $163 billion increase. It is the first DoD budget that has topped $1 trillion with a $119 billion increase in FY26, which is about a 13% plus up. DHS is looking at a $43 billion increase, which is 65%. But again, all of this comes at a cost. You look at state, there's potentially a 48% cut, HUD 44%, HHS 26%, and within HHS, NIH, CDC, HRSA are getting hit dramatically. There's also significant reforms that are laid out in the skinny budget, looking at VA IT system overhaul, looking at canceling many like large-scale and nationwide grant programs that Ryan will talk about later. But again, I think this is the worst case scenario. These are likely not going to pass Congress. There's bipartisan support for many of these. But if we go to the next slide, you'll see these are the priorities that are going to get. This is where they're directing new funding. This is where you'll see the DoD plus up. This is where the administration's investing. And I think this is where I highly recommend clients focus, because they're not going to wait for FY26 for many of these. They will redirect and reprogram FY25 dollars, which are still very, very high. So kind of starting with the DoD, kind of the missile defense, Golden Dome is a kind of top priority of the Trump administration, will be a top priority of reconciliation. There's a $25 billion down payment. It will cost significantly more than $25 billion. You're already seeing Elon Musk's SpaceX, Palantir, and Anduril making a big push for this. Golden Dome will be a massive priority and just a ton of funding flowing to that. As well as NGAD, which is the replacement of the F-22 program, kind of around air dominance. We're seeing tremendous industrial base investments. That's going to be a big priority. Boeing was just selected for that. Shipyard and surface command industrial base, and also just industrial base across the DoD with munitions, restockpiling after kind of the war in Ukraine and conflicts around the world have really depleted stocks. We're seeing massive investments there. And then around kind of nuclear modernization, space dominance. Homeland Security is getting that $44 billion increase. We definitely see opportunities for AI case management, biometrics, sensors, digital wall. DHS will be the #1 place in the federal civilian market. And we recommend a lot of those dollars are going to be flowing to CBP and ICE. USAIS is relatively safe because it's largely self-funded. TSA is actually getting a bit of a plus up as well. I think DHS overall is going to do quite well in this administration. FEMA is looking at some cuts, but we'll see if those actually come to fruition. But I think DHS is the big winner here and should be part of everyone's capture and growth strategy. This state, while they are getting a 50% cut, there's a new America First Opportunity Fund that is getting about a little under $3 billion. That's looking at like where can we make high ROI loans that are good for the American taxpayer and also kind of help these countries receive self-sufficiency. So definitely opportunities there with a brand new fund being set up. The Developmental Finance Corporation is getting a new revolving fund, a little under $3 billion there for loan guarantee, capital recycling, similar to that America First Opportunity Fund. We also are seeing within transportation, large grant increases for the infra competitive grants, rail safety, shipbuilding. Ryan, if you want to talk a bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one safe haven, at least for the moment, for grant seekers, particularly state, local government grant seekers. We are seeing, even just yesterday, not yesterday, but on Friday, a new release for port infrastructure, as well as the latest build grant program. So if folks remember, in the Obama administration, it was the Tiger program. Then under the first Trump administration, it was the Build program, then Raise under Biden, then Build again. So there is continuity. Infrastructure is a bipartisan issue for the most part. And so we are seeing extended funding for infrastructure-related projects. Now, priorities have shifted. We did do a deep dive analysis on the red lines between the Biden administration Raise program and the new Trump administration's Build program. Very interesting to see some of the changes, a lot that we've already discussed, but elimination of mentions for even biodiversity, considerations for bicycling and pedestrians, as well as red lines around unions, disadvantaged communities. So we are seeing more of a traditional focus on safety, economic development, and value per dollar in these programs. But yes, this is a safe haven for grant seekers. Infrastructure continues to grow as a funding priority.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. And just within transportation, we're also seeing FAA is a top priority, major boost to FAA operations in the reconciliation on top of the extra dollars they got in FY25, that's $750 million. And then as well as kind of the national aerospace kind of radar modernization, big reforms plan happening for FAA. So definitely a place we recommend to pivot to. Within HHS, one big bright spot is this kind of a Make America Healthy Again MAHA public health initiative focused on nutrition, chronic disease, childhood chronic disease. So definitely opportunities there. There's a big reorg happening in HHS, so we will be monitoring that. There's a lot of agencies that are going to be kind of molded into the Administration for Healthy America. So we'll be tracking.
And Jared, if I could jump in on that one, this is a particularly nascent initiative, meaning that that's very light on details, and so there is an opportunity for parties that are able to meet some of the top line objectives of this initiative to help sculpt the specific programs that will be developed out of this and funnel this in a positive direction. So very high level, not a clear approach yet. And so there is opportunity for advocacy by folks in the relevant sector.
And Ryan, that's a great point for all of these. These are all many brand new priorities that are still being shaped and still being formed. And this is opportunities for that your firm can kind of get on the ground level and really kind of help shape the future direction. And for the VA, the electronic health record modernization got a $2 billion boost. They're saying that is a top priority for this administration. So definitely opportunities there. There was additional money for veterans homelessness. And then the Toxic Exposure Fund got a large plus up, but most of that's mandatory funding. The one key opportunity in commerce is trade enforcement, supply chain threat intelligence. I think a lot of this is tied to the kind of the tariff strategy, but really looking at, they got $130 million plus up, looking at critical mineral sourcing risk, anti-dumping analytics, like really helping the administration understand where countries are maybe taking advantage of kind of US trade strategy. So Andrea, if you can jump to the next slide. So within this, like what are the top opportunities and priorities under this administration? Really, I think the number one is kind of government-wide efficiency, cost savings, AI-based fraud prevention, analyzing programs. There is a need to do a comprehensive review of federal government spending. We've gone from $3.5 trillion 10 years ago in total federal outlays to over $7 trillion today, so 100% increase. A lot of that happened during COVID. There is an opportunity to really go through and review which programs are working and which aren't. That has not been done yet. It's been mostly focused on canceling climate, DE&I, consulting. Kind of the hard work lays ahead with the rebuild. So huge opportunities to really help the administration and help agencies. If you're facing a huge budget shortfall, where can you make cuts that don't impact mission? So I think that is a major opportunity. There's also opportunities around the Commerce is setting up a new investment accelerator, kind of looking at kind of a one-stop federal investment hub, helping fast track $1 billion mega projects. So brand new office, brand new agency. That is where CHIPS and other major commerce grant programs are going to fall under. So key priority there. We've talked about the others. So Andrea, if you go to the next slide. Another opportunities around wildland service integration. They're essentially consolidating all fire and land management. Right now exists in USDA Forest Service, Interior. There's an opportunity for a reorg there, especially with all the kind of fire disasters that are happening around the country. That's a key priority of the administration. And we've talked about the others. NNSA got a plus up, the National Nuclear Security Agency. Most of that is around nuclear weapons activities, but there is also opportunity around the environmental side, around nuclear waste cleanup. So see some good opportunities and plus ups there. Go to the next slide. So major takeaways. We've hit a lot of these, but I think the key point is this reconciliation is not a guarantee. It is very controversial right now, where it's tied, this new money for DoD and DHS is actually quite popular. Even many of it, especially the DoD, is popular with Democrats. It's bipartisan. The problem is it's tied to $4.5 trillion in tax cuts and around $2 trillion in spending cuts, primarily Medicaid and SNAP. So the fact that it's one big, beautiful bill, as Trump would say, is not a sure thing. So we'll be tracking, and especially with FY26, the skinny budget, all of those increases are tied to the reconciliation. So if reconciliation doesn't go through, the DoD and DHS is looking at a flat budget. So definitely, we will keep monitoring and keep you all updated there. But I think we talked about most of this, so I think we can jump to the next slide. In terms of kind of what are growth strategies for you all, this is from kind of a federal contractor primarily perspective, but Ryan, I'll let you layer in for grant seekers. I think number one is rebuilding your strategic pipelines. We have seen kind of many of our clients 50% cuts to contracts that they were going after, either procurements being frozen or delayed. We're starting to see some of those come online with the new wave, but I think it's rebuilding your pipeline aligned to where is the market going? What are those priorities? Is it a kind of administration priority? Is there funding? That to me is number one priority, because we're looking at a totally different world compared to last year. You're still working under the same pipeline you had pre kind of inauguration, then you're in trouble. And the next is really tying the current work you're doing and future work, looking at the kind of what is the return on investment, what is the benefit, what are the cost savings, what are the outcomes, really moving away from the staff aug kind of T&M model to more firm fixed price, more outcomes, really showing federal agencies what they're getting for their dollars, and helping them defend against DOGE-directed cancellations. I think that is really key. Looking at kind of the fast procurement vehicles, so we're seeing a huge increase in demand for OTAs, other transaction authorities, commercial service offerings, CSOs, SIBRs. Those are really, especially for innovation and technology, which is going to be a big priority under this administration, just like it was under the last. Those are real safe harbors. That is where a lot of those procurements are going, and they're open. So they propose, we have an AI use case. These are our challenges, and companies can propose and send in white papers, and that can translate to kind of high dollar, high impact OTA awards non-competitively. The other big opportunity I see is around like crisis response. Many federal agencies have been decimated with workforce cuts, with cancellations, and agencies in the future will be tested. I look at FEMA as an example. The next big hurricane, FEMA is not ready for that today. So starting to position in agencies that are likely going to face service delivery challenges, especially in a crisis, and starting to be kind of their preferred partner, building those relationships so you're ready to help them when they need it. I think FEMA is a good example, but anything around kind of the disaster recovery ecosystem. So I look at HUD's, CDBG, disaster recovery processing. I look at Social Security Administration, which is already starting to feel the pain from the DOGE cuts. Being ready and able to quickly help and staff these federal agencies that have been really hurt. I think that is a highly recommended priority. Next slide, Andrea. We talked about this, so I think we can move on. The reconciliation is not a sure thing. The FY26 budget is not a sure thing. It's a lot of those massive cuts are dead on arrival. So we're going to get more details in the next few weeks with the full, all we have right now is a skinny budget. We're going to get the full comprehensive look in a few weeks. And that is important because it's showing like what is the strategic priorities of the administration. Even if all these things don't come true, where is the administration going to be channeling money and funding? And it gets very tactical. It's going to say this office wants to do this, and here's the funding. So that is along with your pipeline development, we really recommend kind of the shaping and kind of many of those will be new opportunities that have not been, there's no RFIs, nothing's been created. So shaping those early and aligning with your organization, highly recommended. And the only other point here is navigating a very narrow Republican Congress. Reconciliation needs to get almost universal Republicans votes because it's not going to get any Democratic votes. So key update there. So with all this being said, where would we focus as kind of top priorities? So we've talked about the defense and security related spending surge. The House earlier was proposing $300 billion increase. A lot of that's going to be front loaded in FY26, which we talked about, that $119 billion. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, cybersecurity, industrial base, digital transformation, and enhanced tech, automation. Those will be top priorities. We will see now there will be more of a look at which ones are performing well, like this big digital transformation is not going so well. So it'll be a bit more ruthless with cuts, but those overall markets will continue to thrive, especially with the push for workforce cuts. They want to kind of bring in technology and automation to replace a lot of that. So we expect really robust demand for cloud, analytics, customer experience, et cetera. The other big areas are around strategic planning and kind of organizational kind of overhauls. We're tracking many big reorgs happening across almost all federal agencies. Look, HHS is a big one with MAHA, but then NIH is consolidating institutes. CDC is going through a big reorganization. State and USAID are reintegrating. There are big opportunities to help. A lot of these are coming from DOGE, which isn't a government expert. They're more of like a technology and engineers. So strong opportunities to help guide, I think, a once-in-a-generation government reform opportunity. We just got to make sure they get it right and it's done well. Otherwise, you can cripple a lot of these kind of core agencies. The other areas are around workforce gaps, addressing where most of the cuts are. A lot of them have not happened thoughtfully or strategically. A lot of them have just been a chainsaw. So helping understand where those opportunities are. The other one Ryan hit at was multi-year infrastructure, industrial policy. We definitely see some shifts. CHIPS is, I think, going through a bit of a review. That was the semiconductor bill, but we definitely anticipate further investments, particularly around the roads, the bridges, the bipartisan aspect, the climate and energy, particularly in the Inflation Reduction Act, we definitely worry about, but the core of infrastructure is a safe harbor. And then, of course, the AI-driven fraud prevention, program integrity. GEO estimates around 300 to 500 billion a year is lost to fraud. This is a top priority of the administration. Every agency is looking at this. A lot of agencies have been doing this for years without a lot of success, like CMS, Medicaid, and Medicare, but this is going to be a top priority, especially integrating the latest kind of artificial intelligence capabilities. And the last piece is kind of more implementation partnerships. DOGE has been doing a lot of those reforms alone and just by themselves. And as DOGE kind of fades away, there's going to be huge opportunities to be that agency-led reform partner. So helping them cut cost, eliminate duplication, instead of the outside in, really working with the agency leadership to help rebuild, especially where they're in a state of crisis and it needs to happen to maintain service delivery. I think I'll hit on this quickly and then I'll turn it over to Ryan to talk grant seekers. Number one big strategy I talked about before, you got to rebuild that strategic opportunity pipeline. 6,000 contract cancellations, even more grants. There is a need to rebuild that growth strategy and portfolio. So recommend there, and Grant Exec and ACG with Samwise, we're here to help. I think that is why we built our companies for this moment, and we're excited to partner. The next is kind of really being focusing on strategic partnerships. I think there's going to be some big winners in this administration and a lot of losers. Pivoting to DHS, pivoting to DoD, to Army, Navy. If it's a new market, really partnering with an existing provider and like accessing their contract vehicles, leveraging their past performance, that's going to be really important. That scenario planning, really understanding the budgetary and kind of regulatory landscape and how it's going to kind of impact and kind of shift your business, emphasizing the cost efficiency and ROI, diversification, and then really kind of coming up with the plan to rebuild government. We're still in that kind of chainsaw cutting government down phase, but the rebuild phase is coming and it's much harder and the government's going to need a lot of help. And we just want to make sure we're there with our clients to help assist. With that, I'll turn it over to Ryan to talk from the grant seekers perspective.
Yeah, let's talk about it. I wanted to share this slide briefly, and you can see today's data on our website, but the federal grant market has shrunk about 35% since January 1st of this year. Today, there are still over $50 billion in open opportunities. Now, that's a decrease from about $80 billion, $85 billion, but there are still 1,500 open grants, over 30,000 expected awardee organizations. But you can see where the trend is moving, at least for the moment. And so we anticipate, as Jared said, over the next few weeks to months, an increase as this funding is pushed out the door. However, we are monitoring closely and things are changing on a dime. And so market intelligence is crucial to make that happen. There's more data on that link right there below. Happy to drop that in the chat as well. But let's talk about opportunities for grant seekers and how they can meet this moment should they be pursuing federal grant funding. Next slide, please. Thank you. Before I go into these specific items, I wanted to share a broad brush insight that we've heard from some of our government affairs partners and just tracking the policy positions of the new administration. This administration is heavily focused on branding and spectacle, which means certain aspects of this work are not consistently ideologically driven, but more focused on ensuring that the brand of the administration is protected and popular. That means that certain programs that are at risk may be rebranded so long as they are justified to the administration in a way that presents them in a positive light. So when you see programs like Raise to Build, or you see programs and innovation that are being renamed but doing similar work, that is a continuation, but has to be presented in the proper light and seen as appealing to the current administration. Now, so let's talk about it. What does this administration care about, and how, as a grant-seeking entity, can you deliver for them in a way that's productive for all parties? One, reframe your value proposition. So ensure that you're focusing on that economic impact. What is the ROI for the local economy or the national economy from your project? Efficiency and measurable ROI. These are good practices for any grant application, frankly, particularly on the measurable ROI. But make sure that you are aligning with those funding priorities and the language in particular. The language has never been more important. You see very specific red lines and changes to word choices from this administration, and so staying aware and being able to adjust your applications accordingly is critical. And more broadly, diversify your funding streams. So we at GrantExec don't just track the federal market. The federal government is, of course, the largest single entity grant maker in the United States, but there's a long tail of thousands of state agencies as well as local entities and the private sector that gives out over $100–200 billion in grants every year. So state governments, for the moment, are continuing to fund programs at a high clip. Now, we will be tracking that closely, as typically a quarter to a half of state budgets are federally funded. And so we may see a decline in state opportunities should there be disruption from the federal government. That said, we are also seeing private funders stepping up, even funding, in some instances, for-profit initiatives. We've seen Bloomberg Philanthropies stepping up to fill the gap in climate funding, as well as a number of others increasing their annual giving from typically 5% of their endowment up to 10% or sometimes even more. So there are private funders meeting the moment. It won't be able to replace the funding that would have come from the federal government or funding that was flowing through the Biden administration, but there are alternative opportunities. They're just harder to find. Now, conveniently, that's why we exist. So shameless plug, but that's the work that we do to bring those opportunities to you rather than you searching through 50, 100,000 different sources. And then also importantly, we've already seen success from this, but form strategic alliances. So consortia with credible mission-aligned partners, and particularly bipartisan organizations, if you can find them and they align with your values as well. So we've seen efforts by the National Council on Nonprofits. We've seen a number of other organizations either partnering with universities, for example, Harvard, to push back on some of the most critical funding changes. That's one approach. Another approach is to find areas of advocacy that are perhaps less directly confrontational, but ultimately lead to the outcomes that you're looking for. Of course, with that, focus on long-term engagement with foundations and local funders. And then ensure that when you are building relationships at the federal level, recognize that in a lot of instances, at least for the moment and likely to continue over the next few months, the contacts that you have at that agency may not be the same people that you'd be speaking to in a few months. And so diversifying your contact base is critical because of the upheaval that we're experiencing right now. So stay close, stay informed, and make sure that you have a good relationship with the wider office. Of course, you need to show how your mission can adapt regardless of the political climate and return a significant ROI to the population that you serve. And then, of course, artificial intelligence plays a key role here in keeping you up to date. As you can see, there's an overload of information out there. The zone has been flooded, and so it's essential to use tools to process this information and stay ahead so that when a aligned opportunity presents itself, you're positioned to capture it. I also want to turn it over just for a minute to Dr. Steinberg to talk about grant seekers, particularly research, R&D R&D work, particularly for small and medium-sized businesses as well as startups. We have been expanding our database to include OTAs and opportunities that blur the line between grants, contracts, and other transaction vehicles. So, Dr. Steinberg, please share a little bit about what you're seeing.
Sure. Thanks, Ryan. So you guys have covered almost everything that I would have said. I have just a few add-ons for the points that you've made. So for specifically for those of you who are looking for research and development dollars, it's really sort of a critical time for those who want to invest in basic research. What I will say is you might have to be creative. So NSF, NIH have been hit really, really hard. And you may have never considered opportunities with other federal agencies like DoD and DHS. This is the time to start thinking creatively about what you want to accomplish and whether you can tailor your research plan to goals of those agencies. They obviously have gotten a huge funding boost, but I think a lot of people are also not aware of how broad DoD, the technologies that DoD funds. So for instance, one thing that I've seen, there's right now a lot of there's a push for industrial base modernization, as well as, you know, reshoring and onshoring of technologies. And industrial base is everything. It's everything that goes into the operation of a base. So for instance, you know, although the administration has shunned renewable energy, actually there's a tremendous number of renewable energy priorities for the industrial base, and they are going forward with electrification and switching to renewable energies that can support that electrification, because their goal is, of course, increasing sustainability of that base and autonomy, you know, outside of, you know, possible interruptions to our fuel systems or other things. Like, so investments in battery and energy storage and those kind of technologies, while they may appear to be not friendly to the current administration, are very friendly to the priorities for the DoD. And also, something to keep in mind is that these are, for those of you who are early stage technology developers, these other transaction authorities or even research and development contracts with the DoD, they want to fund dual use technologies. They don't take equity, and in very rare cases that develop weapon systems or other systems that are critical to soldier lethality and capabilities, they will not prevent you from selling or developing those technologies for the marketplace. So that's also another way, you know, to look to get your technologies developed, is through, you know, custom builds for the DoD. I think another thing that we didn't really talk about, but I think a huge priority that will be going forward, in especially in regard, you know, with respect to the current trade policy, is going to be domestic production and manufacturing that is perhaps may have been not cost competitive before with other countries. I think there's going to be, suddenly there's going to be a lot more, it's going to be more cost competitive now in light of trade tariffs. And so I think that that's another opportunity for a lot of organizations. Also, things like onshoring of critical materials and production of those materials. So obviously we think of this in terms of minerals, but it could be other things, you know, like semiconductors is always going to be huge and it's always going to get bigger. So anything that goes into that, and that's going to include things like graphite and graphene, composites, and anything that, you know, silicon, things like that. So for companies that perhaps have an interest in something that, again, hadn't been cost competitive before, like perhaps recycling or recovering minerals from landfill leachate or, you know, waste products, you know, and maybe before you hadn't thought that that technology would be cost competitive. It will be cost competitive now in light of tariffs, and there is going to be those incentives to sort of develop those technologies and reduce the cost with them, so that if the administration changes in the future and those trade barriers are lifted, you'll still be cost competitive with those technologies. I also believe that there's going to be opportunities for creative public-private partnerships. There used to be an old NSF program called GOLI, which was grant opportunities for academic liaisons with industry. And the goal of that was actually to accelerate translation of technologies from the academic sphere to the industry or to the marketplace by leveraging the talents of both academia with industry. So academia being able to do a lot of basic research and development, and industry being able to translate that to the marketplace, actually determine, you know, how to scale up production and make it applicable for, you know, insertion into the marketplace. I believe that there's going to be opportunities for that in the future. But again, it's going to take creativity, and it may be something where researchers are going to have to bring this to the agencies as opportunities. The agencies may not consider this themselves. And then the last thing, as far as Ryan already said, is changing your language and applications. So there's going to be certain redlined items. However, maybe you're just going to have a creative rewording of what it is. It's going to mean the same, but it won't be captured by whatever, whoever is, whether they're using AI or it's individuals who are looking specifically for words that are considered red flags. You're just going to circumvent that. So for instance, companies that have previously done a lot of work towards climate mitigation, perhaps in energy efficiency or renewable energy technologies. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to use the language that Jared brought up, and it's you're going to make it more efficient. You're going to make it more, there's going to be economic incentives. You're going to reduce the cost for operations. You're going to provide a return on investment for these technologies. And so it's going to be reframing what you're trying to do that won't negate what you're trying to do as far as the goal of your technology and your research, but will cast it in the appropriate light, as Ryan said, to maintain Trump's the administration's brand and what they're hoping to achieve.
Well said. Thank you, Dr. Steinberg. I wanted to touch on just one more item related to that. We talk about onshoring advanced manufacturing and bringing manufacturing jobs back to the United States. That tariffs are one portion of that, but the numbers really don't add up unless you have significant government investment supporting that as well. And so if there are entities, I was asked recently, if you were advocating for manufacturing funding from the government, what would you advocate? What would you say? I think there are two bipartisan items levers that you could pull on. One is concerns about China. It costs about 1/10 of the cost that it does here to build drones in China, and China subsidizes their semiconductor industry to the tune of about 140 billion a year. So it's an unfair advantage for China, and then also every federal dollar that's invested in private industry brings along another $7 in private investment. So there's a strong economic development motive to support the advanced manufacturing reshoring here in the United States, but it doesn't work without additional funding from the government. I know we're running up on time, so let's keep it going. Jared, back to you.
Yeah, the one thing I'd add too is we're also seeing, to that point, a huge flurry of kind of robotics, smart manufacturing, really kind of high-end R&D opportunities to build the manufacturing of the future. What does the future Navy public shipyard look like? How do we build weapons and drones faster and cheaper and more in an automated manner? I think that is going to be one of the #1 priorities of this administration. We're going to see, I think, a ton of funding flowing to that. And you're starting to see already with the Commerce Investment Accelerator, how do we build big mega projects here? And I think that is a bipartisan priority. So that will continue even with the next administration. So a very good call out, Dr. Steinberg. Thank you. I think next we can talk a bit about Samwise AI, ACG's kind of a proprietary AI platform for really that top opportunity identification. So what we really do is we have a kind of high-end AI agent that is integrated with domain expertise. So it's not just an AI platform. It augments a small team of kind of federal market intelligence experts. And we do that so we can very quickly and affordably build companies a true top opportunity pipeline aligned to this new administration and kind of where it's going. And we don't just look at opportunities, we can also bring in what are the emerging opportunities? Where's the funding going within the Make America Healthy Again initiative? What are new opportunities? So I think that is something that makes us special. The other key is we don't just identify, we then can go deep and help qualify. So I think that's a differentiator as well, really help understand why this opportunity is a great fit for your company and then how to win it, really kind of going deep. We combine both the Samwise kind of AI platform with true federal consulting expertise. And really kind of that model is different in this market. We don't want to just be an AI tool or AI platform. We want to be a federal market, a kind of intelligence solution that's AI enabled. I think we want to go to the next slide, Andrea. I don't know, do you want to share the screen on Samwise, or I just want to filter through here? I guess at a high level, what we built, in my opinion, is I think the number one industry pipeline. So we have identified every federal artificial intelligence, every federal cybersecurity, digital transformation, industrial-based supply chain, really you name it, and we've tiered it. So very quickly, if you, let's say you're a cybersecurity company, I can build you, here are the 25 opportunities you should be going after over the next 2 or 3 years, and why. And why it's what is your value prop? And then really going deep on a few of those. And I think that is like the true differentiator for us. And we're now ready in a spot where we want to get it out into the world, and we want to work with dozens of companies and help kind of bring kind of that magic to them. So we'd love to kind of schedule a demo. We'd love to, I think first and foremost, we've got great content off the shelf, share samples of great opportunities. And that's our vision of kind of making this next step, is really getting this kind of powerful platform we built into the hands of small, mid-size, and large companies, but particularly those small, mid-size that are really struggling in this moment. So please reach out. We're happy to help, and we're really excited for this next chapter.
It's an exciting time, Jared. Full disclosure, I sit on the advisory board for ACG, and the Samwise tool is an amazing new solution. We at Grant Exec consider ourselves a sister company to ACG's work. What they do in contracts is quite similar to what we do in grants, and they have an amazing tool, so I highly recommend taking the time to learn a little bit more about it. This audience knows Grant Exec pretty well, and so I don't think we need to go into too much of a deep dive on our work, but I think we have a few questions. So with the time we have remaining, maybe we jump into those.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone, for your time and for all your information and insights. We did get a couple of questions ahead, and if anybody has extra questions, please drop them in the chat. The first one is, how does the federal grant environment affect the private philanthropy given environment? Ryan, do you want to take that one?
It's a great question. There are significant downstream effects of the federal government backing out. One, for grant seekers, competitiveness increases in the private market. For organizations that were anticipating funding primarily through the federal government, particularly climate, diversity, equity, inclusion, any kind of social or social justice related funding is gone. And so thus they need to look to identify alternative funding sources, which means competition for private grant funding is increasing. Similarly, there are certain foundations that will have stepped up to increase their giving, and so that's excellent. That may not be sustainable. There's a reason why endowments typically give about 4 to 5% of their total assets in grants annually. It's because they can refresh that through their traditional investments, and so increasing from 5 to 10% is an excellent short-term solution. But those foundations are actively taking the risk to meet the moment, but they will, if they follow that path for more than a few years, then they will have to seek their own funding or raise funding themselves. So there is a significant challenge. The other part of this is the pressure from the administration. There is an active campaign to I don't want to say take down, but to augment or to change the authority of these large nonprofit tax exempt organizations. So there were rumors just in the past couple of weeks of a blanket revocation of 501c3 status for climate related nonprofits. We haven't seen that come to fruition. That may have been a bit of a trial balloon, and the outcry was swift. We actually have a couple of our our own members in the grant exec community who are leading that effort, and we're very proud to support that. That said, we recognize also that any intent to revoke C3 status will be met immediately by legal action, and so the Supreme Court is highly unlikely to support an initiative like that, but that may impact the risk tolerance of certain foundations. So we are beginning to see, particularly when after a couple of legal wins for the nonprofit community, as well as Harvard stepping up and openly defying the administration on their funding cuts. That does create a bit of momentum for organizations that are looking to regain a foothold in this space. Now, it's an open question right now. We're tracking it quite closely. We are seeing steady flows of private funding. Just in the last month, we added over 700 new opportunities that were posted in the last 3 to 4 weeks. And so there continue to be new funding opportunities. I think there will continue to be foundations that meet the moment, but ultimately this is not something that's sustainable beyond the next few years, frankly. So we shall see what happens. A lot of it will also depend on the strength of the markets. If these endowments are doing well, there'll be more money to spend. If not, if we see a recession or even a depression, that will change significantly. Now, I will say there is a world in which we enter another pandemic-style recession, and that will trigger significant federal funding, much of that in the form of emergency grants. We did see that from the first Trump administration at the beginning of the pandemic, and unless I think there is reason to believe that that could happen again, but it's a bit of a wait and see moment. So we're tracking. We'll keep you informed, but hope that's useful.
Thank you, Brian. And I think we only have time for one more question because we are like 20 minutes above our time. And I think this one is for Jared. With federal funding uncertain, where else can organizations look?
Yeah, I think this is, Brian and I can both answer this, but I'll go first. I think the federal market is, there's DoD and DHS are going to be well funded. They're going to get major plus ups, but there are the rest of kind of non-defense kind of health agencies are looking at, I don't want to say the scale of the cuts proposed in the skinny budget, but cuts. I think the diversification to the state and local space is real. I would absolutely recommend kind of a state and local strategy. The problem with state and locals is very fragmented. So focusing on kind of the core based where you're like the Virginia market, Maryland, DC, where we are in the DMV is a quite a healthy, large contracting market. So really recommend focusing on states, but also kind of big counties and cities. The problem for them is they're going to be under quite a bit of pressure as well, because they're also facing the federal funding cuts, particularly Medicaid. The cuts being proposed now would really decimate a lot of state budgets. A lot of states get around 45% of their overall budget spent on Medicaid, and a lot of that comes from the federal government. So you're going to see some pressure that filters down from the federal to state and local level, but it's still, for diversification, we recommend first going to where the winners and growth areas in federal, and then next going to kind of the core, what are the large state and local customers that you can really kind of build relationships with. I recommend partnering with a leading state and local company. States and counties do love working with companies based in their state and county. So recommend focusing there first, and then diversifying to other kind of healthy markets like a New York, a California, Texas, Florida, are very large consulting and overall contracting markets. Brian, anything you'd love to add?
Yeah, I'd echo a lot of those sentiments. I think the main differentiator between the contracting and grants market at this moment is the availability of private funding. We are, in addition to state governments continuing to fund significant clean energy and renewable projects, California, New York, even Pennsylvania. Those funds are available for the moment. We shall see how things play out over the next couple of years, given that those funding pressures that Jared alluded to. But the private market remains strong, particularly given organizations funders that recognize the value of these technology advancements. So even for-profit entities, startups, as well as public benefit corporations and organizations that are doing good, meaningful work that aligned with the previous administration, but not the current one, there is still significant funding coming from private sources. So we will see philanthropists, independently wealthy organizations, even corporate foundations that align with those goals. The language may look different, but the grants will be out there. The challenge is the fragmentation. And so that's where a lot of our work comes in. It's an immense labor, over 50,000 unique sources, but it does make sense at scale. And so we bring that data to organizations that are curious about what's out there. So the opportunities are there. They've now become harder to find. We are lightly optimistic that there will be an increase in grant funding in the next quarter, given the priorities that we've talked through and the timing of reconciliation. And pushing funding out the door, but it is more fragmented. It's less certain, and we are heading towards likely a moment where either the federal government will need to step up and support the market because we will have significant downstream effects of these funding gaps. And so we will feel it soon, and that may lead to significant political pressure, but that is yet to be seen. What we can commit to is that we'll be tracking it. That's my takeaway.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Please stay tuned, and if you have any additional questions or on the topics discussed today, or if you would like to connect for a demo of Samwise or Grand Exec, please reach out to us. Here are our emails. We will also reach out and send you all this information, and we will send you the recording of this session as well. And have a wonderful rest of your day, and stay safe out there. Thank you. Goodbye.
Take care. See you next time.
Next time.